Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Questioning a better way, one gracefully disruptive conversation at a time.
Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila. I'm super excited to be here today. This is going to be an awesome mental health and community conversation. Two things we focus on Turmeric and Tequila if you listen. But this is going to be a really great conversation, bringing mental health and mindfulness to everybody, which is obviously a priority of ours on Turmeric and Tequila and a major reason we started to hold this space to have these conversations. So without further ado, I want to invite Jenni Crumpton Ross to the TNT mic. Jenni, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, we've got lots to unpack. I'm super excited to talk about your background specifically. As you know, we always talk about the human behind the mission before the mission, but she is the CEO and founder of Kula for Karma. And it's an incredible organization. Just her quick 411 is she is the president and CEO for Kula for Karma, a national nonprofit with a mission to make mental health a human right. Kula provides an accessible, equitable, affordable, and scalable solution to our nation's mental health crisis with scientifically proven programs teaching mindfulness, yoga, meditation, breathing techniques, and other trauma-informed practices and educations to underserved and marginalized communities in crisis. And that's incredible, number one. But your bio, coming from Fortune 500 corporate world and your own personal experience navigated you, it sounds like, to this exact path. But before we get into that, tell me about young Jenni as a kiddo.
Oh gosh. So as a kid, I was really into dance. I considered myself an athlete as well. Kind of unconventional to think about dance as athleticism, but for me, it was really my way of expressing through my body, and I focused on ballet and was really into things like cheerleading as a sport. And using my body was such a big part of who I was growing up because I was very introverted. So I liked writing poetry, I liked moving my body. And I was actually raised in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was raised in a very, religious household, family, social milieu.
Okay.
And in many ways, that was tough as a girl because there were very different expectations for girls and sort of what their space that they were allowed to inhabit, and a lot of the religious onus on young women. And I actually wrote about that in a book that was published in 2015 called Femme Evangelical, which might spark your imagination as to what that's all about. Yeah, but it was a big part of what I think about when you ask me that question is sort of overcoming a lot of limitations around what a girl could be and who a girl was supposed to be. And what I think I found was as I grew up, the way that I handled that was to explore it from all the different angles. So I actually, when I left the corporate world, I went to seminary and wanted to find out for myself, who is this God and what does this God really say, etc. Who are the people telling us, what this God supposedly says, and really investigating that and coming to different conclusions than how I was raised. So I would say who I was as a girl was really instrumental in flipping the script as I got older.
Absolutely. Well, then that's why I always ask, because usually it's written in the stars. It just takes us a long time to get through it. Usually a lot of money and a lot of intentional time and hours to unpack what was already there. But God bless, we're all that's one commonality I think every human has. What religion did you grow up?
So I was Southern Baptist,
Okay,
and some people call it evangelical,
gotcha.
and went to a Southern Baptist college in Birmingham, that which was a decent academic institution, however, religiously affiliated, and therefore people called it the bubble.
Yeah, yeah.
It was, very not very diverse. Everybody sort of had one way of thinking, one worldview. Um, and yeah, that was basically, the environment in which I was educated and raised. And so trying to sort of work with my own brain, my own mind, my own psyche to kind of start to see the world and other people for um, what is my truth and their truth, was really quite an exercise.
Absolutely. Well, what was it? Because those environments when you're younger are really hard to break free, and I think that's so beautiful. I love dance everything. If I was a huge Madonna, Janet, like '80s baby, '90s kid. So like if I could have been like a dancer, if that was in my athletic cards, I think that would have been my first pick. But it wasn't. So thank God we didn't fully go. But the creativity and that self expression, I think that's so beautiful that you had that outlet, especially in an environment that didn't necessarily align with your authentic soul. However, being in those environments when you're so conditioned to be one way, what was it in you that kind of questioned that better way and that wanted you to step out and not think what everyone around you thought?
I love that question, because honestly, I'm not totally sure.
Yeah.
In the belief system that I've developed, as we kind of all do in our own way, as we go through different phases of life and have different experiences, I just have a sense, some folks are just old souls.
Hmm. Sure.
Seems like it's not our first rodeo, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I always felt a bit like that, like I had sort of a muscle memory within me, and I had, something to reflect on that I didn't fully understand. So, a depth of experience that was, beyond, how I knew I came about having it. So something in me would never let me take pat answers as givens. And something in me just would always well up with information and knowledge and experience, um, that was very different than what I was living through at the time as a kid. And so it was, there were definitely times where I suppressed that,
Hmm.
out of fear and trying to fit in and trying to please people
Yeah.
and to survive,
Totally.
honestly.
Totally.
And I would say there was a lot of trauma around that took a while to unveil itself. But ultimately, I just really couldn't help but listen to that deeper voice that would well up within me. I call it my soul. Some people call it their higher self. There's a lot of spiritual ways of looking at it, but I really see these concepts as being very physiological as
Hmm.
well. So just continuing to allow that to speak, and to listen to that silent witness, that still small voice, and realize that it was guiding me in all these different directions. And, much like when I watch and listen to your podcast, I see this person who's like, you've had this culmination of all these different elements of your life that have led you to your purpose. And I think that's, the same thing that happened for me as well.
Yeah, yeah. As you're saying this, I'm like, yep, definitely. I identify strongly, and it's really interesting because I didn't grow up really religious, and you maybe you've heard this if you've heard some of the cast, but a couple times when I was younger, I got Bibles as like a present from a friend, and I tried to lean in, and my family was never like, don't do this or we just played sports on the weekends, and that's what we did. It was never don't do something. It's just not what we had time for. or made
Right.
time for. And so when I tried to lean in, every time I did, it was just this weird reaction. I used to watch, even recently, the past 5 years, I'd watch Transformational Church. They did a great production on Sundays on YouTube, and they're Christian based, but I just like the production, the mindfulness, the message. And one day when I turned it off, a painting fell off my wall and cut the cord to the TV. And it's been hanging for there for like 10 years. So like there's been these like really crazy
Wow.
signs of like, it's not that I'm not into religion, but like traditional avenues. And I think
Yeah.
Pastor Michael Todd, he got into some trouble. I don't even know where it's at now, but bought his book, and like just something about it just didn't stick. So like I'm open to it organized, but then I'm also very big onto like energy and like silent witness. I love you say that. I'd probably call it just angels or guardian angels or whatever. You know, sometimes people get sticky with like the woo, but really energy is physics, is science based. So
It
I,
is.
yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
so I like that you're the turmeric and tea, like the energy, the woo, or the science, and then the religion. And also, because I do think we exist somewhere in the middle, like it's all true. And like, it's just kind of how you digest it, what it means to you. But I can see, and especially in those environments, how that internal struggle had to be significant.
Right. And, perhaps some people have had an incredible experience with the same thing that I had a terrible experience
Sure.
with. And I would say it was very mixed for me as well. I was, very devout growing up. I really believed in, the things that I was taught and really tried to live them out. And there was good and bad in that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I really appreciate what you're saying. I feel like everyone is sort of in a different place in their evolution. It's almost just like, we're in grades at school.
Yeah.
You have to go through first grade to get to second grade, to get to third grade. And so different things resonate with us at different times and different phases based on our experiences. So,
That's so real. All I see is like Billy Madison, where we're like 40 in second grade, and like we're still figuring out lessons. I'm this for speaking for myself. I'm like, I know this. We've done this grade, but however, we're in it again at 40, whatever. So that's okay. Yeah, I encourage people always. We do have our own paths, our own journeys, our own lanes, and you just got to keep grace in your back pocket at all times, because universe, God, Madonna, all has this trajectory for us. And I think sometimes it just comes down to keep showing up, and that's it.
right. And whatever was within me, my response to beginning to doubt my personal religion that I was raised in was to go to seminary and get ordained as a reverend.
I love it. Well, so tell us a little bit about that. Like when you got there, did it further like validate your internal feelings of questioning things, or like what
It
was the
did.
experience?
Yeah. Sometimes they say going to seminary will make you an atheist. Because you're
Perfect.
really sort of pulling back the curtain in many ways and studying the actual texts and the histories and the people and how things developed and, how all the different centuries and millennia, had their own flavor, just like today, and how that impacted what was all kind of came together to be presented to us as various religions. I had left the corporate world when I went to seminary. So I had spent over a decade working for Fortune 500 companies, creating large scale ad campaigns for clients like Citigroup and MasterCard and Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I had really become sort of disillusioned with how I felt, that it didn't feel like my purpose was plugging into that. And so when I thought, well, what would I do if I left,
Yeah.
and left this paycheck behind and left this ladder I've climbed, worked so hard to climb behind. And many different things kind of came to mind. Well, I'm interested in, I was a journalism major. Maybe I could continue with that. Or, I really love acting and storytelling because it's of the impact on the human soul. But lo and behold, my choice was to apply to seminary. I went to Union Theological Seminary in New York City, which is part of Columbia University. So I was able to study religions from a social justice type of standpoint, looking across all the different religions. And I did focus in on Christianity and Christian history. And I was able to study in Columbia's political science department, sort of cross investigating
Yeah.
how religion and political movements intersect. And it was really eye opening. And I wrote the book Femme Evangelical really to young women in particular who were being raised in different religious communities who might have questions and that they might be afraid to ask for many reasons. And so for me, it was the thing that pulled at me the most because I think it was the thing that had affected me most in my life. And I just wasn't content to sit back and wonder what might really be behind all of it.
Right.
I would say seminary really opened, it confirmed so much of what that voice inside was telling me. And of course, you go to different seminaries, you're going to get a little something different. Union is non-denominational. There's Jews at Union, there's Muslims at Union, but it was originally a Christian institution, and it's always kept that at its core, but has always invited everyone to the table to study. And the benefits of that were just incredible because it was impossible to stay so fixated
Yeah.
on what I wanted the answers to be and what I wanted the outcomes to be.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible exercise to put yourself through.
Oh my God, that's priceless. And how on time. So what time were you at Columbia? What were these years?
So this was 2008 to 2011.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So
Um,
because this is like pre George Floyd, and then you're coming from the heart of corporate America in New York, which I'm usually the only female in the room. It's gotten better now, but in Denver, Colorado, and I love New York City if you've listened to the show, but I love big city. I love big energy. The diversity, I think, is the answer to literally everything. And this is like before Me Too. This is before George Floyd. This is before
right.
like some of these eruption points in our society. And here you are like being prepared accordingly. Did you feel like that? Like now in retrospect, being like, oh my God, like I was right where I need to be at the right time. And now that things are popping off a certain way, I'm like equipped to walk to the front line and address some things.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And I've never even fully thought of it that way, but what you're saying is absolutely true. It was so interesting because I decided to leave the corporate world in like late spring, summer of 2008, not realizing that in the fall, the housing bubble was going to burst.
Okay.
We were going to fall into this incredible financial crisis in the fall and winter of 2008. And, as I looked, I was so scared about my choice.
Yeah.
And look, and then I'm looking back from where I landed and seeing all of my friends get laid off and, lose their jobs. And I had just jumped into this world of transformation. It was such a magical 3 years working on my master's there. And it was so gritty and
Yeah.
difficult because I was faced this girl from Alabama who had been pretty much failed by my public school system as far as historical truths go, particularly around civil rights and things of that nature that occurred in Birmingham. I was really faced with realities and truths that I was just learning about for the first time at age
Yeah.
35. So I went back to grad school at 35, which could be a little intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was just, everything about the way that I was raised was confronted in radical fashion. And there were many times, especially that first semester, that I thought, I do not belong here. I am going to get eaten alive because I felt like everyone was so intelligent except me.
Yeah.
Everybody knew all this stuff except me. And in many ways, that was true. But in every single way, it was my destiny to get thrown into that. And, you know, obviously one might think, well, what is a girl who was raised in a Southern Baptist tradition going to come out on the other side as? Because there
Yeah.
were no women in ministry. And, you know, a Southern Baptist convention still to this day denies women leadership in the church.
Okay.
And, you know, so my head full of these male voices and doubt around, you know, it's like when you put Play-Doh in one of those things and it
Yes.
comes out in some
Yes.
shape.
Spaghetti. Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't imagine what I would come out as, you know, why am I doing this? And you're exactly right. I was spit out on the other side, a totally transformed piece of Play-Doh,
Mhm.
and pretty unrecognizable even to my own self, but in the most wonderful way. And really fell right into this whole new trajectory that our society was taking, you know, around equality and wholeness and the ability for all people to be able to express themselves and be who they are, and to not, you know, endure more trauma based on who they were, whether that's, you know, the Me Too movement, which was something that was very engaging for me because I did experience sexual assault,
Okay.
um, to, you know, George Floyd. And I came out on the other side and found myself working for these different movements in New York City and around the country where, you know, people who are typically pitted against each other were
Mhm.
actually saying, no, you know what, we're gonna join hands and we're going to lift each other up.
Mhm.
And we're going to fight the forces that tell us that we have to hate each other and that we have to, you know, make everything one way. And
Right.
so I did, you know, a lot of different work around racial justice, gender justice, LGBTQ justice, interreligious justice, where we actually used the common tenets of our of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian scriptures that call for peace and sister brotherhood, and would, you know, stand up for each other. So that was,
Yeah.
you know, I could have never imagined as a kid that I would be doing that work, and it was so soul satisfying.
Sure, sure. I mean, I don't know you well, but I just seeing like as a young person, if you can kind of walk in a different, I wouldn't say walk away, but walk in a different direction from your family, your upbringing, your roots of this is what reality is, pivot, you know, to question that religion, and then, you know, get into the corporate world, which is very much, in my opinion, a cult and a religion. And I'm here for finance and things. However, like you live a certain life, and especially in New York, like Wall Street and the energy and like it's a whole vibe. So like to
Yeah.
again pivot and walk, you know, in a different direction from that, like I think you are a strong human, but you are genuinely designed to, you know, be the person that's going to trailblaze into questioning in a better way. And you did this as a young person before you really had conscious thought of like, I'm going to be the leader, I'm going to trailblaze. It was more you just like following your heart or questioning things.
Yeah.
And I love this for all of my cause and charity leaders or initiatives, mission driven humans, and my entrepreneurs. I think the first step towards the right way is the hardest one, and you
Mm.
don't know. There's no guarantees. Sometimes you don't have mental health, sometimes you don't have community, and yet you still have to take that step. Were you mindful of like your mental health? Did you have community supporters? Like when you were taking these major pivots, what did you have to lean on? What was in your corner?
You know, that's so funny, that you asked that, and I'm so glad you asked that because that, uh, you know, we create our own families, and so I had, you know, made sort of a ragtag group of friends
Mhm.
through the different phases. I feel like life in New York City can be like a million different lifetimes,
Yeah, for sure.
just because it's so overwhelming and there's so many people and you meet people and you're with them for a season, you
Mhm.
know, and whatever that phase is, and then a couple of those stick with you as you go, and then you bring in more people in a different phase, who have different things in common with you. And so
Yeah.
I feel like I always felt very alone, Luckily, I liked being alone,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there were always people present who might have been pretty unexpected people.
Okay.
And sometimes they were only there for a season, but there were clearly, looking back, ways that we interacted together to support one another. And
Yeah.
I think it really, I feel like so many entrepreneurs, so many leaders feel this way, where you're sort of a lone wolf in many
Mhm.
ways in your life. You're a black sheep, you're a lone
Yeah.
wolf.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's something to that strength building and that learning curve of finding that support within your own self.
Yeah.
And you should always, by all means, do your best to find a community that can be supportive of you. But when we inevitably go through those periods, those dark nights of the soul, for what it's worth,
Mhm.
sometimes you really feel something within you rise up to meet the moment, and you feel yourself change into this, to the next level of being an evolved human. And I think that's, another thing that so many leaders do go through is a dark night of the soul, whether it's several short ones or whether it's one big long one. And there's just, that whole historical humanness that people have written poems about for centuries, going through that period where you're tested in a
Yeah.
sense. And you find something within yourself that completely surprises you. So I kind of see it as, some of my worst mental health moments probably were things that taught me so much about myself and about the world and about my role in it. And so I've never, by no means should people ever feel that they have to stay stuck in a poor condition of mental health, which is something we all go through in our lives. And at the same time, as we work to heal ourselves and find that support and community, we can also learn so much and take so much with us. Why
Yeah.
go through it if we're not going to take out the gems?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you need those challenges. I like that you said that in New York City, like the most crowded place in the world, you felt so alone. And I think that is so true. And I think that's why you hear celebrities that are, around all these people, and a lot of them are yes men, but there's so few people that can relate to their reality. And I think every human goes through it, but especially as an athlete or an entrepreneur or mission driven human in general, I don't think most of us feel like we relate to a lot of other people. I'm a
Mhm.
people person. I think you are too. And like you can assimilate and chameleon and, have great friends and community. And then you still kind of always feel like I always say the hot pink sheep, like something just doesn't, align. And here we are, white privilege, blonde female, like you can kind of just fit in.
Right.
And it still feels a certain kind of way because your mind is a little bit different. And I the feeling alone, I think I've definitely certainly felt that. And my narrative, especially as I've gotten older and reflected, was I felt I had to do things alone. I was unconscious of
Yeah.
like, if no one else is going to do it, I have to do it. And then I have to do it alone. And I got to do everything. And, and
Mhm.
like, so
Yeah.
it was good, but also I want our young people to really get comfortable being alone. I think that's really important, that you don't need to be alone forever. You don't need to do everything by yourself. And you need to be with yourself and your spirit, because then the longer podcast of
Mm.
that is you're never really alone. Like, and you look back and you just said, there's people in my life that showed up. Like, I look back and I'm like, God, I was so protected. Like, I know I have something important to do, not from an ego, but like literally I made some dumb decisions, as a college kid, and we're in DC with no money and there wasn't Uber then. How are we gonna, like, just stuff where it's like, how did I get through that? And I remember like me and my friend were downtown, and two guys, we were walking to the metro and it just closed down in DC at 2 a.m. If you're in DC, this is so annoying. And two guys out of nowhere were like, you guys can't be walking through here. And they walked us to like the next restaurant. We're like 4 blocks away and got us into a car. And then we turned around and they were gone. And it was, there's stuff like
Yes.
that. I know I get the chills where it's like, and again, I'm not
Yeah.
religious. This was before anything. I look back, I'm like, oh my God, like there's moments where I know people showed up at the right time, things
Mm,
happened at the right time, like stuff. And even the breakdowns where I'm like, damn, like it really is all moving towards something. So long-winded point. I really do think it's be comfortable being alone and knowing really on the flip side, if you can get in touch with yourself, spirit, energy, religion, whatever, something's there. Like something is there and always with you.
yeah,
And you got to be alone and create some space to feel that.
you really do. And the quiet enough to hear that voice, that is your true self, and get to know that person. And I think, I love this, but I love what you're saying, because, that's how you come to know who you are and what your
Yeah.
purpose is. And, one of the things that um, worry about, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and just, she's starting to kind of be interested. What is all this social media stuff?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes the more people and noise we have around us, the more alone we feel.
Mhm.
There's been so many reports about why social media is bad for our mental health. And sometimes it can make you feel great, and like you have this community or a group of friends, and other times on the flip side, it can make you feel so isolated and critical of yourself. And I think there's such a big difference between the type of community that we can build that is supportive, and so good for our mental health, and then just having that constant noise, of people and commentary and opinions. And opinions are great, but eventually I think it overwhelms our nervous system and can overwhelm our own voice of truth. And when we don't get to know that, it's devastating to our trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so wild. Before we jumped on the mic, I was literally just eating lunch and I was watching some quick update on something. It's like they're taking mental health and therapy outside. And I'm like, oh, you mean what like the indigenous people did from day one? Like now we're spending all
Right.
this money to like go out and like and they say go into nature, sit by like get like it is literally calming, touch a tree, do this stuff we've literally known for hundreds of thousands of years. And now it's, $180 an hour to like go take a hike. Like, come on now. And I'm glad to see we're moving in a direction, but it's just so funny how, we've moved so far in a direction and then like the answers are now these expensive things that were otherwise free. And just
Right.
this question. And I even see our
Yeah.
young people, getting, 6, 7, 8. I hope they're not on social media that young, but I do have friends with young kids on it. And they'll be like, I don't want to be on TikTok. I don't want to be on this. Like, I have so much
Mm.
faith that our young people are not going to have some of the pitfalls that we did, even though it'll be
Mhm.
different. I think they are more connected to like the original path that was always there. I mean, it's very
Um,
interesting how it switched. I do want to ask you, just because you said you studied religion and politics, which oh my God, to me, that's just it's obviously there and it's always business and there's strategic partnerships and that's a whole podcast. But I'm curious just on your view, like how much the media has played. Because when you're studying with all these different
mhm.
religions and viewpoints, and you can see this harmony and common ground and core values, even if your beliefs are totally different. And here we have the media hyping this narrative
Mhm.
that I do not think is true, and yet it is how we're consuming a lot of that. Can you just this? We'll just make this a quick
Yeah,
piece, because I want to
sure.
get to the Kula for karma. But it's so interesting to me. Like, I mean, what's your view on the media and it designing our perspective?
Oh, yeah, and like I mentioned, I was a journalism major in
Yeah.
college, and everything I learned in journalism school was about, giving people the facts and then letting them put the pieces together. I did, I did a lot of media commentating when I came out of grad school, because I found this opportunity where people really wanted to talk about this, interaction of religion and politics as it related to the headlines and things that were going on in the world. And, you know, I think the point you're driving at is what I found, which is that the media wants a sound bite. The media is looking, they want a sound bite for something that's so deep and so layered. And, they're looking at their ratings and they're looking at the audiences they're attracting and the advertisers that they're bringing in. And I just see that it's gotten so divisive, and so the dumbing down of information into these silos of, this is what you like to hear, so over here we'll say this, and this is what you like to hear and what makes you feel okay, so over here we'll say this, and then the hatred that can be shot like lasers, between different media supporters. And, I just find that so corrosive to any real learning or knowledge or exploration of the world. And I don't know that we can course correct. And so I think people have to sort of take everything with a grain of salt, and again go back to that truth within the human psyche, because when it all comes down to it, we're all one. Like you were talking about the scientific nature of energy, and how very real all of these seemingly woo-woo things are. But when it comes down to it, we are all made from the same stuff, and we are all part of the same material and human condition. And so I think it really tears at the fabric of who we are as human beings, the way that the media is disseminating information and siloing information and pitting us against one another. So I really hate to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yes. And I do think like the kids getting off social media and stuff, I think there's a pivot point upon us where I think so. And I do marketing and branding professionally. I'm here for social media as entrepreneurs. It streamlines process. It makes it cost and time effective, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
And I'll tell you to get off of it. While I sell it, I tell you to get off it because there's other ways. And that's also why I do influencers. So it's in real life, etc. My thing is I have faith that our kiddos, regardless of what, the humans out there are promoting, and let me be very clear, I'm very intentional with the messages I put out there, and absolutely does it cost my bottom line 100%, and that's okay. I think that our kids are just going to disrupt these big systems, big food, big pharma, media, and just seeing that, like, yes, therapy's outside right now, or we can do this a different way, just like you did or I did as a young person, being like, God, this just doesn't resonate. I'm gonna go a different way. And if you can be a little bit ahead of the game as a young person and listen to that voice within and just know enough to, like, when I do this or hear this, it just doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel right, so I'm gonna go this way. And I think that is just enough for those early years.
I think you're so right about that. When I look at my daughter, um, she's 7 now, but even when she, was first becoming verbal, she would say things to me like, "Mom, it's my body,"
Gosh,
or
I love it.
like, she would say these things. I can't even imagine. And it seemed like it was just coming out of her. Like
Yeah.
she was born this way. This is
Yeah.
how humans are coming into the world now. They're already very confident and very unique and very self-confident. And I can't even imagine if my daughter was raised in the context and environment that I was raised in, she would have been tearing the house down, She
I'm
wouldn't have
here for it.
taken
Yes.
any of it.
Yes. Yes. I love it so much. I mean, well, all things really are on time. Like there's nurture, but like, damn, nature is strong. So like whatever it is, like, I don't know.
I think
It's coming through.
evolution is just speeding up. It's like
Yeah.
they're coming
Yeah.
in with differently wired brains, and
Absolutely.
it's incredible to watch.
Well, the energy is different, and we have hormone milk, so there's a multitude of
Yeah.
things that our cows are getting fed. There's a lot of angles we can go there, but it's interesting. It is, and I coach. I don't have kids. I do have 3 dogs, but I coached for years, and that's kind of why I started the podcast. I'm like, oh my God, I'm on the marketing side. I'm projecting these messages intentionally. So we work with mission-driven humans and companies, and it's still like, okay, how much of this am I promoting that's true? And in fitness and wellness, it's sexy and everyone's naked and this, and like, God, these are the messages they're growing up with. And as I saw that, I'm like, okay, we've got to like create space for good people doing good things to tell the truth. And I really think our young people will not only be able to tell the difference, they're equipped, but they will seek out the difference.
Mm.
And they will consciously be like, I'm not buying that. I know this. Like they're just exposed to so much so much earlier. They totally do have a totally different skill set than we did.
Yeah.
or do. Well, okay, so let's pivot. And I'm really curious when you had tough times or when the assault happened, did you have any of these mental health skills or the communities in your back pocket to when there's breakdown that helps lead you to break through?
No, I didn't at the time. And so I think that makes it sweeter
Yeah.
almost, to come. I came into this space sort of as a culmination of all of my different experiences, understanding what it's like to feel like you have nowhere to turn.
Mhm.
When sexual assault happens in a community where people aren't believed, and cannot come forward without dire consequences, it leaves people no choice but to handle it alone. And that really creates a rift of trauma, um, that starts to affect your body as well as your mind, your health in every way possible. And so much of that I didn't know at the time. I didn't realize at the time. I used dance as therapy, but that moving my body and expressing myself with music and um, in that art form for me was critical. It's how I survived my younger years.
Yeah.
And but as I kind of moved toward Kula for Karma being what feels to me like my seminal work,
Yeah, yeah,
it
absolutely.
feels to me like everything I've experienced and done and studied in my life has really led to this moment of taking the helm of this organization. And in fact, I would say with the populations that we work with and the communities we serve, the fact that I have experienced a dearth of having any support system or knowing what to do has actually helped me to be able to identify with people
Yeah.
in a way that allows me to just be so non-judgmental of what anyone is thinking, feeling, or doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And really, I think just that's what Kula for Karma is all about, is creating safe space for people who haven't had it before.
Yeah.
And so, we serve people who are in addiction recovery. We serve people in prison. We serve people who are in domestic violence shelters, alone or with their kid or with their pet.
Mhm.
We serve people in juvenile justice facilities. Um, and, so we actually go to where people are. And I think
Okay.
that's a key thing that kind of makes us unique as a nonprofit is we know how hard it is when you are traumatized and you're in incredibly terrible circumstances or something very traumatic has happened to you. It is very difficult because you are in that survival mode. So difficult to then have to try to go out and figure out, what do I do now? Where do I get help? How do I, what if I don't have insurance? Or, what if I have somebody who's kind of looming over me, preventing me from seeking help? And so we try to solve that. And I really am advocating for changes in our mental health system in our country to be more proactive and to be more able to meet people where they are, because it is just, the very people who need the help the most
Yeah.
are the people who are under circumstances, whether that's within their own bodies and the impact of trauma on their nervous system can make things so dark and so hard to figure things out. Um, and so, we really are trying to innovate to come up with even more ways to meet people where they are.
That's amazing. Well, so give us, if people don't know what how you guys operate, like give us an example of how, if someone was in need or if they wanted to volunteer, and like give us an example of your process and what would be like first best steps to get in touch and get involved and or get help.
Yeah, so you can find us at kulaforkarma.org, KulaForKarma.org. Kula for Karma is Sanskrit for community for service to others. And you can find all of our information there. But typically our process is that we work with communities, and we were founded originally in 2007 in New Jersey
Okay.
as a local response to an emerging need that our founders saw, both who were in recovery. And they saw that there was a need in their local communities in New Jersey for people to have the opportunity to learn the healing power of mindfulness, and all that that encompasses. And so they really started in such a grassroots way by calling up local institutions like the New Jersey Family Justice Department. They called up and said, "We have this powerful tool. How can we help?" And the first program Kula for Karma ever did in 2007 was working with children and teenagers who had to be removed from their homes by family court due to abuse, neglect, or parents who were drug or alcohol addicts. And so the founders of Kula for Karma, they were just doing the work themselves. They would go to these group homes, work with teenage girls, teach them how to regulate their nervous systems with their breath, with awareness, with movement, and teach them how to tend to themselves in any given moment, how to recognize trauma in their bodies, and how to process and release that trauma through movement, breath, and awareness. And one of the most impactful things for the girls was that these women, these mother figures, were showing up week after week.
Yeah.
They always came back.
Yeah.
And so it really just spread from there. A lot of organic connection into different systems of our government and our society and schools, et cetera, hospitals. We do work in hospitals. For instance, over the period of time of the pandemic, the need started to emerge for frontline workers. So the stress and the trauma that they were enduring, whether that be nurses and doctors in the emergency rooms, the COVID-facing medical staff, EMTs, firefighters, police, all the people who were charged with keeping our communities as healthy and safe as possible, were really taking the brunt of the trauma. And so we started programs for first responders, and we're still doing them to this day. They're in very high demand. So I would say it's been very organic growth.
Yeah.
I sort of took over as president just this past January,
Okay.
and I have this vision for really starting to expand into communities who have typically experienced social injustice, being invisible, social violence, whether that's trans youth who are in a mental health crisis, whether that's BIPOC girls, going into facilities where they gather as communities and teaching them these skills, because, no one teaches you how traumatic experiences stay in your body, and
Right.
how they infiltrate your muscle memories and your cells and your organ systems and completely bypass your brain most
Yeah.
of the time. It's so
Yeah.
hard to recall what happened in traumatic experiences and then live within our bodies. And that, what we provide, which we call mindfulness-based mental health care, is really, in my estimation, the missing link in our mental health care system. We always think, oh, mental health, it's about our mind. It's about our brain, it's about our psyche, our thoughts, and that's all true. But the missing component that isn't talked about or addressed in mental health is the body, um, because the body has tens of thousands of neurons all through it. The Heart Math Institute says the heart speaks to the brain through its neurons
Mhm.
in any given day more than the brain, does vice versa.
Absolutely.
We have them in our gut. It all lives in our body, and that living in our body is what causes our behavior to start really acting out. Because often we don't know, why am I drinking too much?
Mhm.
Why am I feeling so sad and depressed? And we can't fully pull it up in our brain, but our body knows. And
Yeah.
our body, as Bessel van der Kolk so rightly said, the body keeps the score. So
Yes.
that's what
Yeah.
we're really trying to pull into our mental health care.
I love that. Well, and if you look back, if you're privy to the mental health mind body brain game, you don't always put that connect together. Even in health and wellness industry, it took me to learn a lot, and like I told you, I'm doing neurofeedback right now. Shout out to Lex Neuro, they're one of our first sponsors, we love them. And it's
Mhm.
an extraordinary experience to see on, like, even my brain map, like, in your family you're subjective to alcoholism specifically, and I can see it on my brain map. And thankfully I have theta waves, or whatever it is, the right waves that counter it. But I don't believe other members of my family do, so things can be explainable. But when I look at my past, when I'm like, God, I was really sick, I kept getting sore throats and like things, and I'm like, or I had this is a longer story, but I was doing body testing because I was helping a company I was work with do like blood biomarkers for human optimization for training, and my liver enzymes kept popping up high, and it wasn't the tequila because I was competing at the games at the time, we weren't partying, but it was like popping. They're like, you're so healthy, we don't get this, and liver's associated with anger. And I was in a
Mm.
training situation where I was like super unhappy, and it started to physically manifest in my body that I needed to make a move. And I didn't, like you're saying, I didn't have this language, and I live in this industry, like I'm in it, and I still don't know. So if you think about people that are not as exposed to things, which most people aren't because it's really random stuff, did not know, like, how are you ever going to know that these things connect? So that's extraordinary that you guys are facilitating that conversation, because then that can also keep you getting off, a bunch of medication you don't need, or a
Right.
problem that isn't, thinking you have something going on with your liver. You don't, you just need to make a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
These can go down really crazy rabbit holes, let alone if it's something traumatic, or an environment you genuinely need to get out of for your life.
Yeah, that is so true. And that's that fight or flight, when you realize that you need to get out of a circumstance or a situation, I feel like so often exercise and athleticism and our drive to move our bodies
Mhm.
comes from that need to expel that fight or flight instinct, because most of the time we're traumatized not only because of whatever it is happening. Yes, maybe there was a sexual assault or a car accident or ongoing abuse of some sort, whatever it may be, but we never are able to fend it off. We're never able to carry out, like, if you needed to punch that perpetrator and get him off of you, but you couldn't because he was too big or because you were frozen or whatever it was. Um, Peter Levine, the originator of somatic therapy, did so much research around how once you can carry out that fight or flight, that protective mechanism that's just constantly being triggered in your body, you can really start to feel this deep healing start to occur.
Yeah.
And so that just that somatic replay of the fight or flight instinct that was never allowed to be carried out is such a big part of so much of our depression and
Mhm.
anxiety and mood disorders and a range of mental health issues as well as the physical issues like you were just talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's extraordinary how I don't like to say of how much as we can control, but how much we can be mindful of and address with the right coaching and tools versus doing this, traditional Western system. I'm very much here for medication, and there's a time and place for things. And a lot of this stuff we can address head on with the right tools, mindset, lifestyle changes, coaching. I mean, there's just so much like right at our fingertips if we can just find the right path to go down versus all these extreme measures that aren't really treating the root cause. They're just masking symptoms.
Yeah,
So
you're right. There is a lot of masking.
yes, yeah, there's time.
And when we don't think of mental health care as holistic,
right.
we're kind of playing a hand in that masking of things because you know, it's the people who are deep in that darkness of feeling so trapped by their own mental health conditions that makes it so hard to figure things out yourself.
Yeah.
And I think as a society, if we could really make mental health care more holistic and more available and easy to access, I think it would just make such a huge difference for people.
Absolutely. I love that you say mental health is a human right. And I really want to encourage, if you're in it, it's one thing to reach out and be intentional. And sometimes you can't do that when you're in that dark space. So if you be an advocate, if you see someone that needs something or whatever, at least pass on a website, pass on an address. I heard this podcast, and that's why I love social media and things like this, because you can have a concentrated hour conversation, learn a little, just enough to move you in the right direction, and then seek more. So, if you're listening and if you're in good space and you can be an advocate, share the good word, step in, and that you might be that guardian angel like that we kind of talked about at the right time, at the right place to help shift an entire trajectory of somebody's life with a small conversation.
Amen.
Yeah. It's also keep tequila close when need be. I'm very much here for the yin and the yang, because you gotta, sometimes I feel like I go too deep into like questioning everything. What do we gotta do? And like, sometimes I'm like, okay, you just gotta like breathe through it and let nature take its course, because that is a piece of things. But we try and find that balance. Okay. Well, you said the website earlier, but hit us with websites, details, books, anything you want to share with people, or have additional details or you would love them to go check out.
Yeah, so check out our website. We have a lot of tools and resources. Kulaforkarma.org, KULAFORKARMA.org. You can follow us on any of the social platforms at Kula for Karma. And my book is Femme Evangelical, The Modern Girl's Guide to the Good News. Get ready for some wild rides if you pick up that book.
Yes.
And yeah, just we're so grateful for you as an advocate for these things and for spreading the word and being that angel. So thank you.
Absolutely. It always takes a village and a team, and it doesn't matter how good a space you're in or how much your feet are on the ground. You always need your people and your angels, your energy. So it's always a team effort. But I love what you're doing. I love that you are a dancer as a young human, and now here you are moving energy and inspiration through movement and being a leading cause. Congratulations on becoming the president as well. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yes. We'll keep track of you guys. I'm excited to see what's next. Do you guys have representation in Denver, Colorado?
We have a program director who lives in Colorado.
Okay.
I would love to hook you up with her.
Yeah, let's go. We'll have to get connecting the dots. So it's just such easy cross connect, not only for, advocacy and business and partnership, but just soul connection wise. I think there's some power there, but go check out what Jenni has going on. I love the energy. I love the mission. I cannot wait to see how this grows and goes. And I just want to say congratulations.
Thanks.
It's amazing. Let's go.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenni.
Thank you for joining Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.